Hello everyone, it's really great to have you here for another edition of our Sky Tonight program. My name is Seth Mayo, I'm the curator of astronomy for the Lohmann Planetarium, and in this week's episode we're covering the dates of April 26th through May 2nd. And what we'll be talking about is the very large moon that occurs at the beginning of this week. Then we're going to talk about some space flight and space exploration news with that new Ingenuity helicopter on Mars making its first flight, and we'll talk about the launch of Crew 2, the commercial crew flight to the International Space Station, and discuss how we can see the ISS streak across the sky, along with possible sightings of the Crew Dragon capsule from SpaceX. So, let's get to it. Right off the bat, we have a very large full moon to look at, rising out of the east, and this technically occurs at a precise moment of 3:32 UTC on Tuesday, April 27th. But for us here in the East Coast, in Florida and Daytona Beach, where our museum sits, that's actually 11:32 p.m. Eastern Time. So that's our local time for this full moon. It does depend on your time zone and how far you are away from UTC, or Universal Coordinated Time. So this can fall either on the 26th or even on the 27th on Tuesday. It just depends on where you live. But for us in our location, this is the precise moment when the moon is full, pretty high above the eastern horizon here. And where it's located is actually in between two zodiac constellations. If you look just a little bit above and to the right of the moon, you have this bright star we've mentioned quite a bit before called Spica, which is one of the stars, actually the brightest star in the constellation known as Virgo the Maiden. And right underneath it is a rather dim constellation, but pretty well known. Again, it's a zodiac sign called Libra the Scales. And one of my favorite things about Libra, real quick, is that the two stars nearest the moon at this moment have some really fun names. This one to the left here, if you look at the top part of the screen, it says Zubin en Shamali, and the one to the right is Zubin en el Janubi, or Zubin el Janubi. So I may be saying these terribly wrong, but they're fun names if you look them up, and they're right inside of Libra and very close to the moon on this night. Now, you may have heard that this particular full moon is deemed a supermoon, and of course not when the moon has superpowers and is saving the day, but kidding aside, this is when the moon is a little closer to us and it coincides with a full moon. So it makes the moon look a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter, but not by much. As I've mentioned before, if you compared a supermoon with a regular full moon and you put them next to each other, you would not see much of a difference. But the moon may look a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. Now, as I've also talked about recently, there are potentially 4 supermoons in a row. One that maybe was last month on March 28th, there's one now, and one on May 26th and even June 24th. The problem is, some publications are saying that this is the first supermoon of 2021. So it depends on who you ask and the publication or who's reporting if there are 4 supermoons, 3, or even 2 at this time. And the reason why is because the term supermoon is not an exact term or doesn't have a strict definition. It's not even recognized by the International Astronomical Union, or the IAU, this governing body that oversees astronomical terms and research. They don't even have a definition for the term supermoon. It's a term that kind of got popular more recently, and it really actually is similar to a term called a perigee moon. That's a more technical term when the moon is closest to us in its orbit. An apogee moon is when it's farther away. So when a perigee moon coincides with a full moon, you can consider that a supermoon. But again, the problem is there are different definitions for a supermoon. The general consensus for what people define it is when the full moon or even new moon is within 90% of its perigee. But that can differ depending on how you define its perigee. Some say it's 90% of the closest full moon of the entire year. Some say it's the full moon closest to the perigee or the closest approach of the moon within a month. So between the two, on March 28th, that particular full moon was within 90% of its perigee for the month. But if you compare it with perigee of the year, the closest moon of the year, it's about 88%. So it's just outside of it. So some say it is a supermoon, some say it isn't. We reported that it is, but again, it just depends on how you define that term. Either way, the moon is just a little closer to us and full, and you may not notice a difference. One thing that you can notice is that tides may be a little bit more extreme, because again, the influence of the moon's gravity on Earth bulges the Earth out, and during a full or new moon, that's when the moon and the sun combined, their gravities actually influence the tides even more. So if the moon's just a little bit closer to us, those tides can be amplified by just a little bit. So they're more extreme. High tides are higher, low tides are lower. But aside from that, you may see a little bit brighter and a little bit larger of a moon on this particular night. And again, we have two more of them on May 26th and June 24th. They're actually not that rare, but it is interesting to kind of talk about the moon's distance, what that means in our sky and for our tides, and just talking about the moon in general more often is a win for me. And there's actually one more name we call the moon for April, and that's a pink moon, celebrating maybe pink flowers that you can see at this time of the year. It's also called the sprouting grass moon or the egg moon. A lot of growth for the spring or new things being born or eggs being laid that is represented by this moon for this month. So it could be called a super pink full moon, but either way, it will be nice to see in the sky for this time. As we shift our attention over to the western part of the sky just after sunset through this week, we still have an opportunity to see Mars. That is that little red little dot there that looks like kind of a non-twinkling star. And Mars spent a decent amount of time within the horns of Taurus the bull that we see here. But you notice as we turn on these constellations that Mars has now entered into the Gemini twins right here near the feet of Gemini. And so it's slowly drifted. It is actually setting kind of with these objects in the west very slowly, but it has risen above Taurus and towards Gemini in that region of the sky. But what's really exciting, if you've been following the Perseverance rover mission on Mars, and we've talked a lot about it, I've done a lot of virtual talks, live presentations of the landing, and talked about it in this program numerous times. It's such a cool mission, a rover looking for life, or at least past signs of microbial life on the red planet. Very, very exciting. But as we talk about Mars here, there was another really important event that occurred, because not only did we land that rover there and it's been driving around and it's doing very well, but engineers from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory successfully flew a helicopter called Ingenuity, or at least they programmed it to fly, because they can't fly anything live on the planet. It's just too far away. So this little drone helicopter attached to the bottom of Perseverance was dropped off recently. They put it onto the surface and flew it for the first time. This was a technology demonstrator. It's not a main part of the prime objective of the mission, but it's an add-on to see if we could fly something on Mars. And the atmosphere of Mars is very thin. It's only 1% as dense as Earth's atmosphere. So going to Mars is like going 100,000 feet above the surface of Earth. And we don't fly helicopters at that altitude here on Earth. So they had to design a very special little drone helicopter with huge carbon fiber blades that are 4 feet from tip to tip. They're counter-rotating 2 blades for stabilization. A very light fuselage, little box-shaped fuselage, the size of maybe a tissue box, weighs only 1.5 pounds on Mars. And these rotors spin at tremendous rate at 2,500 RPMs, revolutions per minute. That means 40 times a second, way faster than a helicopter operates here on Earth. And this was a big, big moment, because it's the Wright brothers moment for flight on Mars. We've never conducted a powered flight on another planet, just like the Wright brothers made their first powered flight in 1903 in North Carolina. And what's even more exciting, as we've mentioned before, is that engineers actually placed a piece of that original Wright flyer on the drone. So finally, on April 19th, very early in the morning for us, Perseverance, perched on its overlook spot, captured Ingenuity in flight. And here is that video captured by Perseverance of Ingenuity on its first flight. Look at that. There is Ingenuity at the bottom there. There are the rotors spooling up. And then as it goes fast enough, it will lift off the Martian surface. And it's amazing. This is a whole other planet, and there is that first flight on this world. It actually hovers for a moment, then you'll notice it does a little rotation here, stays hovering for a bit, and then eventually it descends back down. This was sort of a test hop to make sure they could even fly on Mars, but it proved that we could do it. And the entire flight actually lasted for 39 seconds, marking the first flight on another world. Here is the first image we got back from Ingenuity, looking at the ground and seeing a shadow of itself, proving that we had made it above the surface, which is so cool. And not long after, Ingenuity made its second flight, reaching a higher altitude or height above the surface at now 16 feet and spending 51 seconds in the Martian air. It did a couple more maneuvers, spent a little more time up there, took some pictures, and made its way back down again. And so they're really cooking on these flights. And here is the first color image from Ingenuity on its second flight of the surface. And on either side of the image, you can see little tiny spheres. Those are the landing leg feet that you can see on either side. So it caught those in the image, which is really cool. So to get video and pictures of Ingenuity from Perseverance is great, but also to get it from Ingenuity itself is really cool. So this can also serve as a reconnaissance vehicle as well. By the time you're seeing this video, Ingenuity has already made its third flight, and you may have already seen the video and imagery from that. And they don't have much time to do these demonstration flights. They have a 30-day window, and they're doing 5 flights maybe. And again, this is only a technology demonstrator to prove that we could fly something on Mars and show that this technology actually works. Once this is done with, Perseverance will leave Ingenuity behind, the flights will be finished, and Perseverance can then do its prime mission of looking for past signs of life and looking at the geology and the past climate of Mars as well. But it's so exciting that we've flown something on Mars. It's paving the way for maybe human missions on Mars one day, and maybe there'll be flights there as well. So that site where Ingenuity flew is a historic site. It's actually called the Wright Brothers Field, which is really cool, and it shows what we can do if we put our mind to it. More exciting spaceflight news, this time human spaceflight, with that Crew 2 mission that was launched on April 23rd, very early in the morning at 5:49. And this is the launch of 4 astronauts, 4 crew members aboard a Crew Dragon from SpaceX, launching to the International Space Station for NASA. It's the second official commercial crew flight, and it's amazing to know that we're flying astronauts on commercial vessels, making it more accessible and more frequent, these types of launches, just paving the way for more accessibility to space for humans. And so what was really cool is I was at this launch on behalf of the museum as media. I was there at the Cape, and we go to these launches occasionally to cover and to witness history here and to show it. And so this is a video I took through one of our museum telescopes of the launch of Crew 2, and there it goes, launching from Launch Complex 39A, where the shuttle flew and even the Apollo missions flew. At the top is the capsule with the 4 astronauts going to the ISS. It was a beautiful launch. I got some amazing pictures. The atmosphere was just right that later in the flight, the exhaust plume was doing absolutely amazing things. And even the first stage, as it came down, had a really cool appearance as its engines were pulsing, creating a really neat effect. These things are amazing. If you're ever in Florida for a launch and you get to see these things, it's so awesome to see in person. And it's such a beautiful and unique experience. Now, this crew, donning their really cool spacesuits that look so futuristic, were on their way to the International Space Station, docked with it early in the morning on the 24th on Saturday. And what's really amazing is sometimes there's opportunity to see both the International Space Station and Crew Dragon in the sky. This is a really cool viewing opportunity that sometimes can happen depending on your location. And what's cool with Stellarium is you can plan ISS sightings even using this software, and I have it set right now in Stellarium for one of those potential sightings, at least in our location here in Daytona Beach. And this is on the morning of the 27th, very early, just around 5:10, 5:11 here, and it's actually indicating where it is. This potential sighting is not very high above the horizon. But if I speed up time here, you can watch that it shows us where it would be moving through. And if you do see the ISS, it looks like a really bright, non-twinkling star. It's brighter than any planet, brighter than any star, moving across the sky. This is sped up, so not this quickly. It can last from a minute to up to 6 or even 7 minutes. Oh, there it goes into view, and it looks really bright. And you'll definitely notice it, and even other satellites as well. You can see another one there. It's an amazing sight, but sometimes if these sightings occur at the right time, you can even see the Dragon following behind it as it chases the space station before docking. And sometimes when undocking, when a crew Dragon is leaving the space station, you can see them. And I actually captured this last year on video during the first crewed mission. This was the test mission that occurred with 2 astronauts. And this video I caught actually from my front yard of the ISS and Crew Dragon chasing it. Actually the same Dragon that flew on Crew 2. And you can see the brighter one is the ISS, and the dimmer one is the Crew Dragon, of course much smaller. And to see those in the sky simultaneously was absolutely amazing. I love satellite viewing, at least for what they look like in the sky. Of course, you can get into the debate about them ruining our astronomical observations, and that's for a whole nother discussion and topic. But aside from that, they're really cool looking, these little orbs moving across our star field. It's quite interesting. So if you ever do need to look up potential ISS and even Crew Dragon sightings, Spot the Station provided by NASA is a great website. You can put in your zip code or your city, and it will give you a series of dates for upcoming ISS sightings. That's what we see here for Daytona Beach. And you can see at the left here are the dates here. I've talked about this before, and how long the ISS is visible for, how high it is in the sky, where it appears from, where it disappears. And down at the bottom, sometimes it'll give you a potential opportunity for Dragon sightings as well. And so this potential sighting was actually a little bit off because the Dragon actually got to the station a little early. So it does depend, and it can change quite a bit. And again, these dates and times are dependent on your location. So you have to look it up for your particular spot. But if you do, it's amazing. So actually for Wednesday the 28th, there might be an opportunity to see for some locations Dragon leaving the ISS, because there is a crew leaving the space station, and you can see both vehicles at the same time. And before that, what's quite amazing is there's 11 people on board the International Space Station. This thing is big, of course. The space station is the size of a football field, but they don't normally have 11 astronauts on board, or cosmonauts as well. And so it's quite busy up there. There's a lot of people, but once the Crew 1 astronauts leave, then there won't be as many people up there. But it's amazing to know how many missions are occurring, how common it is now, how many rocket launches are happening from Florida at least. It's a great time for space exploration and leading the way to the moon again and possibly Mars. That's it for another edition of our Sky Tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if you're in Daytona Beach and in the area, please stop by the Museum of Arts and Sciences and the Loman Planetarium. We're running shows every day. We're doing them safely. So check out our website if you want any more information about that. But we hope to see you back here digitally for another edition of the program. Thank you, and of course, happy stargazing.